Good evening, everybody. Welcome to GM Junior's first 2015 broadcast. It's myself, Josh Liskowitz, and Scott Bischoff here. We're going to talk a little bit this podcast about the East-West Shrine game, which is starting up this Sunday. The players will arrive. Give you a few players that we're really interested to take a look at. And what you're going to see starting in February, GMJuniorScouting.com will be launching. All new website. A lot of new features, can be very exciting, so we hope you're going to come and check it out. So for this evening, we're going to start off. The first guys, that I want to talk about, sort of biased because it's Brett Boyko, the offensive tackle out of UNLV. It's going to be down at the East-West game. Very intrigued to watch him for two reasons. Firstly, because I think he's a tackle that's good enough to play in the NFL. I think he's got left tackle feet. He's a very competitive kid, a very smart kid. But more importantly, he is a Canadian. So he will be a first-round pick in the CFL draft. So he could actually help my Alouettes potentially win a Grey Cup next year, which is really the most important thing, even more than the draft.
Here we go.
Yeah, in general, that's one of the things I love about East-West in particular. You'll see at Senior Bowl all the CFL scouts, and they're really just lounging because they know they pretty much have no chance with those guys.
At least not for 3 years.
I feel for them. They're all there. They're grinding just like everyone else. And they're looking for guys that are slipping through the NFL cracks, like your guy from UNLV, hopefully.
Yeah, and the interesting thing for him is because he's Canadian, he's also going to be selected in the CFL draft because you can't find tackles that are good in the CFL. Most of the tackles that are Canadian that are playing are not particularly good. So if you get one that's good, it's huge because it saves a roster spot. I really like this kid. I think he will probably be a somewhere 3rd to 5th round pick in the NFL draft, and hopefully he makes it. But if he doesn't, this is a guy who could start for a long time in the NFL. So I'm really excited to take a look at him. I didn't know who's the first guy you wanted to talk about, Josh. I didn't know. I know you mentioned some Michigan guys that were on your idea of that you wanted to talk about tonight.
Yeah, I both Michigan guys I'll talk about. Russ, real quick, I wanted to ask you, just for anyone listening in that might not be familiar. There's a certain ratio of Canadian to foreign-born players that CFL teams must have. What is that ratio?
Well, it's two things. There's 44 guys on an active roster plus 2 which are considered reserves. So a total of 46 players on your team. 21 of them must be Canadian. And the new rule in the new CBA, which was just passed last year, is they do not have to be born in Canada. They must have a Canadian passport. They have a Canadian passport. They are considered a national player. Anybody else that doesn't have a Canadian passport is international. During a game, you must have 7 starters on offense and defense combined. 7 starters must be Canadian. So on our team, we've been fortunate enough to have 5 offensive linemen starting for many years, and that's why always identifying offensive tackles is huge, because if you have a tackle that's Canadian, it helps you fill a spot with a quality player that is Canadian, and that way you can fill your skill positions with U.S. players, which is generally with a better, more explosive skill position guys or U.S. guys, not so much Canadian receivers and corners.
So, Russ, where does a guy like, for example, a Brandon Bridge, who I know is receiving some NFL draft attention, where would he go in your draft?
You know, if he had no chance of playing in the NFL, he'd be the first pick in the CFL draft by far, because the opportunity to have a Canadian quarterback would be a slam dunk, because that's one of your 7 positions, and he's a frontline player, so it'd be huge. The reality is, from what I've heard from NFL scouts, is Brandon Bridge is going to be anywhere from a 3rd to 4th round pick. Teams really think highly of him. A lot of teams have him higher on the board than guys like Bo Wallace and a kid from Mississippi State who may come out early, whose name is slipping my mind right now. Dak Prescott. A lot of teams have him ahead of both of those guys on their board. They think this kid he's a 6'6" kid. He's about 235 pounds, runs like a gazelle, has a strong arm. Teams really like what his potential is. Like I said, he's going to get a chance in the NFL, so he won't be a first-round pick, sort of like Tardif last year. Would have been the first pick in the draft, but because we knew he was getting drafted in the NFL, he went in the 3rd round to the Calgary Stampeders. Bridge will probably go in that same range, maybe the 2nd, because he is a quarterback, and some teams willing to say, hey, we'll give up a pick for the chance to get a Canadian-born quarterback.
Well, Russ, trying to keep it moving along, I think possibly the showcase player at the Shrine game is most likely to be Michigan's Devin Gardner. Obviously, he played quarterback there. But he's going to play. He's already come out and said he's going to play wide receiver only, which I think is a very smart transition for him. Not only is it clearly an adventure for him at quarterback, but he actually has experience at wide receiver from a couple years ago. His freshman year, he started off as their backup quarterback. His sophomore year was Denard Robinson's senior year, and for the first half of it, they transitioned Gardner over to wide receiver, and really he was their top threat while not really understanding any of the nuances of the position. But you did get to see his ability in space, his movement skills, working on his ball skills with the ball in the air, that type of thing. But he certainly has the size and prerequisites, athleticism. So I am excited to see how he looks there, because I think we see, again, he has those baseline traits you look for at the wide receiver position, despite being so raw and so new to it.
And, you know, I look at him, and I look at guys in the NFL now, when you look at the Calvin Johnsons, the big receivers. I mean, that's what Gardner is. He's a big kid. He's smooth, fluid, athletic. He can run. I remember seeing him play receiver at Michigan and saying, wow, this kid may have a chance. Now, I don't know if it's going to end up being where he goes down there and lights it up, because if he catches the ball well, this could be one of those guys that works out well at the combine, runs decently, which I think he's going to run in the 4.5s because he is a heck of an athlete. And I could see this guy being a 4th to 5th round pick by some team willing to take a gamble. I don't think he's going to have a chance to go higher than that, but I can't wait to see him down there at the East West game.
One of the other things about him that's going to work in his favor, while I don't know that his work ethic at the quarterback position, his work in the film room was always exemplary, everybody at that program around it swears by him as a kid. They absolutely love him. He's just a perfect citizen, a great team player, and I think that's really going to help him in this draft process because, again, like we said, not much film on him at the position. So when you see the baseline athleticism, when you hear about how he is, who he is as a person, I think that's going to help him elevate himself to that draft area that you just said.
And then add in the fact that because of his experience as a quarterback, you could keep him as your third receiver, your third or fourth receiver, emergency quarterback, and you could run some of that run option stuff down by the goal line with him as the primary ball handler. So he has a lot of value. So I can't wait to see him. I think he's got a chance to really help his draft stock by going out there, running decent routes. And if he catches the ball well, teams I think are going to get very excited about this kid.
It begs a question for me when I think about him. I instantly am going to think about, do we have to fight the concept that, all right, he looks good for a quarterback, right? He's catching the ball good for a quarterback.
Well, that's the debate. He has to get to the point where we stop saying for a quarterback. If he gets to that point, then he's a legitimate receiver prospect. If he does not, then he's probably a guy that's really not a prospect that you have to draft, but more of a priority free agent.
One quick note on that, Scott. We do need to remember when Denard Robinson tried to play wide receiver at Senior Bowl his year, and he wasn't good catching the ball for a quarterback, wide receiver, defensive tackle, you name it. He was awful. But he's transitioned and actually starting to develop in a pretty solid running back if he can ever maintain his health. So
you have to remember he couldn't open his hand, couldn't close his hand.
That is true. That was certainly part of it. Yeah, he did have the injury coming in.
And I'll give him credit for even competing in that. One of the players that I'm intrigued and also this is going to be funny. I'm a little concerned about this kid. I'm intrigued to see him. His name is John Crockett. He's a running back from North Dakota State. To me, he looks like a lightning-fast north-south type runner. I don't think he has I'm not going to say he has lateral quickness that's off the charts, but for a north-south type player, he looks like he's got incredibly explosive legs. And here's the problem. To me, he looks a lot like Matt Forte, a little skinnier Matt Forte, with that really tall, upright style. I'm curious to just see how fast this kid is, and to see what he looks like on the field. But I'm worried that at the next level he's going to get broken in half, because you know how it translates to the NFL. Everybody's faster, I think he'll run in the 4.5-ish range. So I'm not talking about like this lightning fast player, but at 6'1"-ish and 215 pounds, he's a big kid who can move. Especially if you give him a crease between the tackles where he doesn't have to go side to side. He's really explosive that way. I'm kind of interested to just see what that speed looks like, and kind of. I mean, we've seen the running backs at this game, and a lot of times it's a little. I don't know. Would you guys call it a little bit lesser than, or just
a little bit disappointing almost?
Yeah, disappointing. I would say is a very fair word. I'm excited to see what he looks like with the speed.
Because I'll tell you what, any running back that's in that 5'11" to 6 foot range with good weight, they don't have to be 4.4 guys. And I'm interested, does he have the agility I want to see to make quick cuts? Does he at least have the first step quickness to get through the hole? If he has those two skills and shows that he can catch the ball, then you're talking about a guy that has to be a consideration as a draft pick because he's got the size, the agility, the ball skills, and he's got enough quickness to get through the hole. He's a very intriguing guy. I'm really excited to take a peek at him when we get down there.
And always with running backs at the All-Star games, one of the things you can probably discern the most information of is when they do the pass blocking drills. I'm always excited to see that from backs, especially from someone like him who has the prerequisite size but comes from a smaller school in North Dakota State. So a different level of competition. That in itself is going to be a big step up for him, a big opportunity for him.
Yes, and I believe it's a weakness at this point. I'm not sure that I consider him to be a very strong pass blocker. So it'll be very interesting to see, for us to see what we see this week. Let's talk about the coaches real fast, just if we can, real fast. I believe it's Singletary and Jim Zorn.
Yep.
Which will be a little bit different than Romeo Crennel type situation.
Oh, yeah, we're going to have some energy going on here. I'm excited about the fact that we're going to get to see, hopefully, some hard-nosed football. I don't think Singletary is going to let his guys sort of loaf around. I think he's going to push them, get them going hard. And I'm interested to see how Zorn works with the quarterbacks because he has a knack for getting guys to play a little better, be a little bit better at playing within their skills, not trying to do too much. I want to see how he does with that aspect of it because it's vital to be able to see these quarterbacks play the best they can. This is their best opportunity to really impress people other than games. So I can't wait to get out there, see these coaches. Now, it's funny, you mentioned Devin Gardner. I'm sort of looking at a guy, Blake the Bulldozer Bell from Oklahoma. I can't wait to get a look at this guy. This guy was the guy everybody thought was going to be the answer at quarterback a year ago. Come in, step in, take over the job as a junior, but it really went south. He didn't play well, and all of a sudden he gets transitioned to tight end. And when you look at this kid, you're talking 6'6", 260, very athletic kid, caught the ball very well. But the problem is he didn't get a lot of opportunities. He actually got phased out at certain times during this season. I'm very interested to see how does this big behemoth of a man function in an all-star game setting, because I could see this guy being one of those tight ends in a weak tight end class who shines this week, gets people excited. Maybe he gets that late invite to the Senior Bowl, or people just get very excited and all of a sudden he's a guy at the combine that there's a buzz about because he's big, he's smooth, he's athletic, and there really are very few tight ends this year in the draft. There's Max Williams from Minnesota, and then you're really sort of throwing darts to find out who the next high-end tight end is. So if Bell goes down there and really impresses, I could see him jumping way ahead of a lot of other tight ends in this draft.
Obviously last year had some really quality talent at the top of the draft at that position with a couple of guys. But we have an example from last year of a tight end that came into East-West, looked the part physically, looked real smooth, had a real nice week, got the bump up to Senior Bowl, and really outplayed everyone there. He's actually playing this weekend for Baltimore, Crockett Gilmore out of Colorado State. So hopefully we get to see a similar progression from Bell as well.
Yeah, he was a guy, I tell you what, last year I think all of us we had seen him, but we had not really gotten a great feel for his athleticism. Not that he was this explosive, fast guy, but at the East-West game, you really got a feel for this guy. Smooth, he knows how to get open, runs outstanding routes, and wow, did he have great hands. I mean, he caught every ball thrown his way, made some highlight reel catches. So I tell you what, if Blake goes there, he could really help himself because he's bigger, and I think he's a better athlete than Gilmore. So if he goes there, he could definitely help his draft status drastically.
Mm-hmm. All right, moving along, another Michigan guy that's an intriguing player. And again, a common theme that we're talking about here with some of these prospects is changing positions or maybe playing out of position at their college. And that's what happened with Michigan's Jake Ryan this past year. His sophomore year, he was fantastic at Michigan. Just played with his hair on fire coming off the edge. He could blitz. He was instinctive. He could dip around and get off blocks quickly and made a lot of plays behind the line of scrimmage. Tore his ACL. Came back, tried to play a little bit of his junior year, clearly wasn't the same. And then this year, they transitioned him to middle linebacker, and he was completely lost for much of the year. Just really a wasted year for him. Just instinctually, he was terrible inside. He missed a lot of tackles, constant issues with play action and coverage. Really did not have a strong year. I know he finished first team All Big Ten as a linebacker, but that's really based on his reputation from past years. He really did not have a solid year. As the year progressed into November, they started playing him outside a little bit more, and you got a little bit more of those flashes. Hopefully, that's what we're seeing going forward. He's staying out in space, and maybe we'll see that he is starting to get his legs back after having a full year from that injury. So I'm interested to see where he's positioned and how he transitions as well.
It's funny you say that, because another player that I'm intrigued about is a player who lost the 2013 season to an ACL tear too. It's Austin Hill from Arizona. And when he comes back, he's lost his position. We're talking about a big kid who, we've seen historically what happens with the big receivers, the bigger receivers like the Chris Harpers of the world, kind of guys who struggle to separate, that kind of stuff, and that looks to be. I don't know if he fully recovered from that ACL or if maybe he lost a step, but so he comes back to the Arizona offense, and they line up as a lot as a tight end or as an H-back, and they'll run real short curls with him or a real quick developing routes with him. He struggles to separate. He doesn't have real. He's just not a very sudden player at this point. I think it's intriguing that they line him up out of the slot so much as a big guy, as a big player, which tells me that he's just not quick enough or fast enough to develop the plays that he needs, to run the routes that he needs to run outside. But, we're talking about a kid who's big enough to be good as a red zone target, who's very strong at the catch point. An intriguing player just from the sense of what he was in 2012. He had a really good year. He's going to be one of those guys that I'm going to be watching just to see what kind of speed does he have, what kind of quickness, where's he at with his route running, that kind of stuff. It's a guy who was injured, came back, lost his position, and played out of position this year. So it's another one I'm looking forward to.
See, and for me, both of those guys I'm intrigued by, because Hill, I can remember what he was, and now I want to see, hopefully, they're not just going to lock him in at one spot. I'd love to see him do some H-back stuff, do some receiver stuff, move him around so we can get a feel for where he really fits best. And when it comes to Jake Ryan, I just really hope, ideally, they play him outside a linebacker, but more than anything, I want to see if they let him rush the passer. Because to me, that's the thing. If he's going to play in the NFL, it's going to be rushing the passer. That's the thing that's going to allow him to have a career. I think that he has a knack for that. He knows how to defeat pass blocks. So even if he's not a starter, I think his pass rush skills, if he can show them in this game, he could help himself a lot to where 34 team may say, you know what, he's not a guy we want as our starter, but he can be our third outside linebacker who comes in pass situations, because that, to me, is his only skill set that's above the line for the NFL, is his ability to go forward, attack that, and pressure the quarterback.
Yeah, that's always such a huge thing to me, this theme, Russ. You look at other sites, everyone's got their draft board, they got rankings, but how much have issues where you can't look at from team to team. The draft board's going to be completely different because they're looking at different things, at different positions. They have different expectations for what they need their different players to do. So you get a player like a Jake Ryan that in one scheme you might need to play off the ball and not be real active as a blitzer, and they can't really utilize him. But then you look at another that has a 34, they have maybe Arizona, He's a 34 outside linebacker. They're really intrigued by him because they've seen in the past what he can do as that pass rusher. They're more likely to value him higher, to take him higher, if they get that kind of see that kind of skill set from him in an environment such as East West Rifle.
Well, I think there's no doubt. I think one of the misnomers out there is that every team's draft board looks similar, and that teams value players correctly. And people would be shocked, I think, if they saw how many players are listed as first-rounders on certain teams' board, and that same player can be a 6th, 7th rounder or an undraftable guy on other teams' draft boards. So that's something I think that is unique, and also that's what we're going to offer on our website. It's something that we're still working on, but we're going to have it where you can look at the players ranked by what we think each team will view them as, because certain guys will not fit certain schemes, and we're going to try to differentiate that for people. Now, the last guys that I want to mention, Martin Effetti, defensive end out of Memphis. He started out this year on fire. Looked like he was going to be a guy that could really challenge, not only be a Senior Bowl, but maybe even a Day 2 pick. Then he gets hurt, missed about 5-6 games, and really wasn't 100% when he got back. He came back and he played and he competed. He made a few plays, but he wasn't the same guy. I'm hoping now he's had a month off since the season ended, that at the East-West game he can show some of those pass rush skills. He showed a great ability to set guys up. He's not a rare athlete, but he's a good one, and he has good technique. He has a knack for being able to deceive the offensive tackle, set him up, freeze him, and beat him inside and out. I want to see how he does this week. If he has a good week, I could see him being a late add to the Senior Bowl because pass rushers are so hard to find. And this kid, although he's not a pretty body kid in terms of he's not that 6'6", 270 guy that looks the perfect part, he's a pretty good-looking kid, and he's a natural pass rusher, and those are too hard to find. So I can't wait to see him line up, especially when he goes against the guy Boyko from UNLV. But just to see him get out there, I want to see this kid rush the passer. I think he's a very intriguing prospect.
Well, there you go.
Well, gentlemen, that'll wrap it for this podcast. We're going to do another one in moments. We're going to talk a little bit about Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, and then the 3 big receivers, Devontae Parker, Amari Cooper, and Dorial Green Beckham. A little bit of insight into the differences, the similarities between those 3. So come check that out. You'll be able to see that. We're going to start that in just a few minutes.